Hello, folks. We're just waiting a few minutes for folks to log in, and we're looking for one more board member to join us, which should happen shortly. Um, and then we'll get started. As I was mentioning, as folks were logging in, we're just waiting to see if we get one more board member logging in. I believe that they're trying to do so right now. Yeah, technical issues will start in just a moment. Should be just another moment. Just working through a technical issue real quick. There we go. We now have 4 of 5. Excellent. Welcome, Damien. And I will now call this meeting to order.
Thank you for your patience, Brooks. Sorry, that was weird.
Not a problem. Technology is technology. So as we open the meeting, South Whidbey School District would like to begin by acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral homelands, originally known as Shekolchi, in Lushootseed of the coastal Salish peoples in the lands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial and have hunted, fished, gathered, and taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this territory and for their enduring care and protection of the land in which we currently occupy and share through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855. All right, next on the list is the agenda and the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda and minutes?
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Since everyone said aye in the first place, the motion passes. Before we move on to the next step, I will note that we will, as has become our habit, we will absolutely attempt to read and answer any question that comes in with a name and general location, just Freeland, Langley, Clinton, Green Bank, whatever that may be associated with it. We will not be taking anonymous questions, as is the case when we are in public as well. Okay. Dr. Moshe, would you like to?
I would like to take the next item. It gives me great pleasure to talk about the fact that it is School Board Appreciation Month in January. The governor's proclamation is up on your screen. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will say that the work of school board members is hours and hours of time that you dedicate to this work. And you folks in particular are an awesome school board working together. I know some of our members are new, but have hit the ground running. I was really happy that we were able to honor you virtually by sharing your photo and your something about you on Facebook, because it's important for our community to know that you're devoting lots of time and energy and effort to being part of this board member team. So on behalf of the students and the staff in South Whidbey, thank you, school board, for your service.
Thank you for those kind words, Dr. Moshe. I can only speak for myself here, but it's an honor to represent the people of South Whidbey School District, the community on this board. We have the consent agenda next, which, as always, is several standard procedures bundled up into a single motion. So with that in mind, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion to be had? I didn't think so. I will move it along to a vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 That's all of us, so all approve, please say nay. Okay, the consent agenda is approved as listed. Next up, we are going to open up for public comment. We have been accepting Q&A questions throughout these meetings, as is our usual time, but if anyone has a specific statement they would like to make at this point before we move on to new business, now would be a wonderful time to submit a Q&A question with your name and location, please. Here, and there's one coming in. Yes, Gwendy has a question. So I will hold off while she types it in. I know that it is certainly a longer process to type something in than it is to say it in public. So absolutely, Gwendy, please take your time. As that is coming in, I'm just going to go over briefly what the new business items are. First is the approval of the South Whidbey High School new course offerings, which, if you haven't had a chance to look at the recording from our last board meeting, the workshop, the committees that put together these course offerings did a fantastic job, from Mr. Patton to teachers and staff and students and community members and experts in their field. The presentations are top-notch and can probably answer many of the questions that come up. However, as usual, we will be happy to answer them as they come in. Okay, I actually have a question from Kelsey Baird here. I'm wondering about the reopening plans and if the new information, more contagious strains are here and canceled vaccinations that would be health have been taken into consideration. We'll have a full presentation on that towards the end of the meeting in the report section. Oh, no, sorry, in the in the report section. And that will hopefully answer your questions. But all of the latest information has been taken into consideration as of this morning, right, Dr. Moshe?
That's correct.
And then,
Brooke, if I might suggest, if they're not related to the agenda items on your list, if they're regarding reopening, we might want to wait.
yes, I will hold, this next one is in regards to reopening, and I will hold it until we are discussing that issue. Okay, here is Wendy's question, which is a general purpose question, not related to anything specific on the agenda. So I'll pop it up now during public comment. Wendy Hastings asks, I know we have a seminar coming up about suicide prevention. Thank you for mentioning that, Wendy. That's fantastic, and it is on our district website if you'd like more information. The question is, what is the district doing to be proactive to get the students the social emotional that they need? For example, peer Zoom chats, social opportunities via internet. Actually, upon reading this seems like something that we can address during the reopening as well. So I'm going to put a pin in that and move on to the new business items, and we'll get back to both of the questions here from both Wendy and Wendy Hastings and Deborah Davies during the reopening portion in the reports. So first new business item, Memorandum 2021 number 14, approval of the South Whidbey High School new course offerings. These are the ethnic studies class and the environmental science class that were discussed at the board workshop. Do I have a motion to approve these course offerings?
I move to approve these course offerings.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Just a bit of appreciation for those great reports last at our workshop. I learned a lot about the process of how these came to be, and it was wonderful to have student voice at the forefront of that discussion and presentation. So thank you to everybody who participated in that.
I'll echo that experience of enjoying the presentations and respecting the thoughtful process and the many stakeholders who were involved.
Damien or Jordan, anything you would like to say on this?
I just want to say from a student perspective, I'm really appreciative of this decision, especially as a BIPOC student. I know many of the students were wanting this class, and yeah.
Thank you. It's always wonderful when you can bring us that student voice in our decisions. Okay, with no further discussion, I will, we have been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of approving Memorandum 2021 number 14, the approval of the South Whidbey High School new course offerings, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum is approved. The course offerings will be offered. Excellent. The next item of business, Memorandum 2021 number 15, approval of the contract extension of the superintendent until June 30th, 2024 per the attached document. This one will be a roll call vote, actually. And I've asked each of the board members if they would be willing to talk a little bit about their thinking behind their decision. With that in mind, we will start with I believe that this is the order that we discussed, the newest board member.
Need a motion.
Oh, yes, sorry. Do we have a motion to approve the extension of the superintendent's contract?
I move to extend the superintendent's contract by 1 year.
Do I have a second?
I second.
It has been moved and seconded. Now we have chance for discussion first. So if it is all right with you guys, I would like to put any statements you may have alongside your votes. Do I have a motion to shift our protocol that way?
I move to shift our protocol so that we may share a statement at the time of our vote.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? None available. So now we will go through in roll call order and have our discussion in the form of statements. So Marnie Jackson, if you would go first as our newest member.
Thank you. I have considered Dr. Moshe's performance over the past year in relation to two key challenges, one being the pandemic and its interruption of face-to-face learning, and another being systemic racism and the ongoing imperative to move into deeper and more authentic equity work. In terms of the pandemic, I feel that Dr. Moshe has kept up with the facts under changing conditions, and I see her leading a well-informed, science-based approach that balances sometimes conflicting needs and does so with the best interests of our student and community at heart. I'm grateful for her leadership in this regard. And finally, on the matter of equity, I've seen meaningful improvement in the superintendent's approach to addressing these issues. And I hope to see continued progress as we reckon with the realities of racism and other forms of systemic oppression. I look forward to seeing Dr. Moshe support staff in gaining more skills and capacities and in supporting better experiences and outcomes for all students. And so I vote to approve the extension of the superintendent's contract by 1 year.
Thank you. Ann Johnson, you're next.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I absolutely echo what Marnie said around what I have seen in Joe's performance in terms of meeting the goals that were set for her by the board in terms of equity in research and execution. We've seen the fruits of that in the last vote we just took on those 2 new classes. And also, again, that systemic approach to keeping us all safe during the pandemic and thinking about all the layers that go into that. That is a full-time job in and of itself. And I have seen her, work with her staff and her administrators. And at this point, we have seen such a scientific approach, like Marnie said. And yeah, sorry, this is my 3rd meeting today. So again, echoing everything Marnie said, and I vote to approve a contract extension.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. I actually realized I should have asked Jordan if he had any input before I started voting. You don't have a vote in the matter, but we would love to hear your input, even though 2 of our members have already voted. And I apologize for not asking you that ahead of time.
Yeah, I completely agree with Ann and Marnie. I think when considering the pandemic and systematic racism, it's definitely have made improvements this year.
Excellent. Thank you, Jordan. And now, Damien, to you.
Brooke, I think what thing that needs to be explained, and you need to take the opportunity to do this now underneath my time, and that is the difference between this contract and the previous contracts being that this is a 1 year rather than a 3 year. I think the general public would like to understand that.
Absolutely. There's actually a couple of things that I will address about the contract, starting with the fact that it is a 1 year extension to an existing 3-year contract. And that was a question that was asked by someone in the questions also. And yes, this is a 1 year extension to an existing 3-year contract. So it will take it out through 2024. The other note is that the only change has been to roll some of the dates clearly, and to roll some of the financials into a single number. And it is, the base salary has been raised by the CPI and the Consumer Price Index. So keeping that simple and straightforward going forward as well. So that is the only change to the contract. And Dr. Moshe, please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
The base salary is the same. It gets raised on July 1, and that's the same as it was in the prior contract. And yes, the contract is extended by 1 year to 2024.
Kathy Glaze asks, why are we addressing an existing contract that expires in 2024?
I would ask that you don't answer any questions from the public right now. We're doing board business.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I will
Not that-
clarify that after the
Yeah,
vote.
well, it's just, I don't mean to be rude, but this is our time.
Good point. I will clarify that after the vote. So Damien.
I'm satisfied. I think Joe has had a very challenging year. I think that throughout this whole entire year, we've been doing things to the best information that we're getting at the time. So I appreciate all the efforts that have been done. And I sincerely appreciate that we're basing the salary at the same and just looking at the inflation, which is standard for anybody in a regular contract. So there you have it. I do vote in favor of renewing Joe's contract.
Okay. Thank you, Damien. I was preparing something to say, but everyone has already said pretty much everything I wanted to say. I've been impressed with Dr. Moshe's drive to excel, her ability to inspire the administrators that report to her, and to be a community touch point for not just the district, but the community as a whole during this pandemic. The board gave Dr. Moshe 2 goals to address the reopening while keeping safety, student, staff, and family safety at the forefront. And I believe she's done that excellently, and as well as keeping equity issues front of mind. And again, I believe that we continue to make advancements, and we will continue to make advancements. And Dr. Moshe has shown the willingness to put in the work to continue that mission. I also vote to extend the contract by an additional year, which means that we have a unanimous vote to extend the contract for 1 additional year through 2024, and that motion is approved. At this point, I will note, thank you, Damien, for noting that this is better done after the voting. There was the question of why we're addressing the existing contract that expires in 2024. It is standard practice, is my understanding, that these contracts roll, and that is something that we can discuss at a later date if the board wishes to do so.
Brooke, if I can just help clarify. It's
Absolutely.
actually item 14 in the existing contract that the board does this prior to February 1st each year to determine if it's going to extend the contract by 1 year or allow it to expire at the end of the term. So you're fulfilling the contractual requirement, which is typical in superintendent contracts.
Yes.
So
Thank you. More than standard practice, it is, as you say, written into the contract. And that is why we are addressing it now. Next on the list, I do see these questions continuing to come in, and we'll address them at the appropriate time for their topic. So the next item of new business is Memorandum 2021, number 16, which is the slight wording change to the equity and inclusion policy. As you can see there, the language that we've added is highlighted in yellow. That's the only change that we had here. This was language that was suggested to us by a student group that we discussed at the past workshop, and it was noted as being a way to extend these protections to people that we may not recognize yet. do we have a motion to approve the change to the equity and inclusion policy?
I move to change the equity, inclusion policy.
We have a second.
I second.
Excellent. It has been moved and seconded. Discussion. Are there any board members who would like to comment on this? I realize we discussed it quite a bit at the last meeting, or some at the last meeting, but I wanted to provide that opportunity. With that settled, all those in favor of approving the change to the equity and inclusion policy, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. The motion is passed. The update to the equity and inclusion policy has been approved. It's wonderful that this will continue to be a living document as we're updating it for the needs of the school district. Last point of new business before we get into the reports is memorandum 2021-17, the approval of the update to policy 2410, graduation requirements. It's my understanding that these updates are those suggested by the state in this case.
I'll jump in here, Brooke. The policy actually is getting a minimal update. What changes is the procedure, and all of the procedures are based on exactly what the state requires us to do. So that's where the change will be. But we do change a few things on this particular policy.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the changes to policy 2410?
Move to approve changes to policy 2410, high school graduation requirements.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving memorandum 2021-17, the approval of update to policy 2410, graduation requirements, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Memorandum 2021-17, approval of update to policy 2410, graduation requirements has been approved. We are now moving on to reports. I want to get a couple of the comments that are not that are in regards to topics that we have gone past already. Actually, two from Jackson Murphy, thanking the board and the district for approving classes and thanking us for listening to youth voices. The other comments, thank you, Jackson, for the feedback, for providing that youth voice. We always want to hear from our students, and it's wonderful that when you are stepping forward to talk to us. The other ones are all in regards to reopening, so we will wait until that point to address them. At this point, I believe it is for Dr. Moshe to, Mr. Poolman for financial and enrollment report.
Just a second while I share the screen.
Not a problem.
Okay, well, good evening. That's our school board report for January 27th. We'll report enrollment as of January 2021. I'm not moving. Or just kind of slow, I guess. Okay, so this is January enrollment, and it's 1164. You see the breakdown on the screen of the different buildings and how much they are. The next screen will actually give you a comparison to previous months. So you can, a little faster than it should be. So you can see that the 1164 is down slightly from December, which was 1166. The way enrollment is reported is from September through June, and the OSPI takes an average and then funds is based on that. So our average from September through January is currently at 1174. That's about 49 fewer than we had budgeted in the previous year, and a change of about a little over 2 FTE from the prior month. If we look at it by building and by month, you can see that our average in the first column is the K4 North Campus. They're at about 401. We had budgeted 426. So you can see the difference of about 25 for there. And then the 5, 6, the 7, 8, and 9, 12. And that gives us the total average of 1174 by district. And if you have any specific questions as I go through, feel free to stop me with this.
Just confirming that that is mostly in the kindergarten, correct?
It predominantly in the kindergarten. Yeah, there's 13 in the 7th and 8th grade, but the
Yeah.
biggest chunk of that was we have a lower kindergarten class than we had anticipated, and that was to be expected, to be honest.
Mhm.
So it just gives you a quick view. Upper left corner is going to be the different grade groupings. You can see that the kindergarten is much smaller than the other grades, and then just the very sizes that we have in there. Predominantly, you're looking at about 80 to 115 per grade, depending upon the specific grade. On the right-hand corner is the year-to-date September through January, and you see that we started a little bit higher and went down. It's a pattern we see every year. It's just the way the enrollment actually works. As we move into second semester and some things change. There's also on the bottom, there's our alternative program, which is about 10 kids. Our CTE program and our special education program. A little bit of difference and change in those, but nothing major. And this is just the bigger picture. Upper left is the pattern that we've seen in the 3 prior years on the top part, and the red one that's partially across the line is current year. And then the dotted line is anticipated. Based on the previous year's pattern, this is what we anticipate enrollment to look like. And you can see it's a very similar type pattern that we've had in the past. And then the bottom part is just historical, if people are interested in what does our enrollment look like over the years. And the lower right is basically the change from year to year. So it's just the difference of either, we went down 1%, 2%, no percent, whatever it might be. That's just the change that we've seen throughout the last few years here. Then we go on to the financial report, and this is as of December 31st. We're a third of the way through our school year. So we're 4 months into a 12-month year. So we would expect that our expenditures and our revenue would be roughly that 33% if we start looking at percentages rather than looking at dollars. And you see that our year-to-date revenue at about 6.7 million falls in that category. The lower left is the pattern of our revenue. We have a couple months because of local levies, so we get more funds in those months. Otherwise, it kind of bumps along, but it's a very similar pattern except for those levy collections, which we do know are down because of the change in legislation that changed the funding formula. And then on the right, it's just the funding. And you can see that our funding is actually a little less than it was last year and the year before. And we anticipate that because of enrollment decline and also that loss of levy funding that we couldn't collect in there. Unfortunately, I'm a little slow here with this moving. And then this is just a picture of our revenue year to date. The dotted line is what our annual budgeted revenue looks like, and then how we're making progress on that. And the bottom is our revenue collection by source for the last 3 years. And you can see the only one that's really majorly different is the far left, and that's our local levy funds. And you can see in the last 2 years that we're collecting less than we were able to. It has nothing to do with the community voted. It had to do with a change in legislation that changed the funding formula that increased our basic education funding, but decreased our local levy funding. And then if we look at the second one, you can see, and it's kind of hard to see in this picture because of the size of it, but the blue line is substantially lower than the red and purple next to it. That's our local funds. And that's because we're not in school, we're not collecting fees, we're not collecting as much rent at the community center. The pandemic has affected local revenue probably more than anything else at this particular time. And then the big chunk in the middle is our state apportionment based upon our student FTE. You will notice that we hit January, that's going to have a change because the first 4 months we are funded based on our budgeted amount. And in January is a process they call truing up, which they adjust it to what your actual is. And when I looked at it today, it looks like our funding will drop about $550,000 due to fewer students. So we'll see that in the January report, but it's something that, you know, will happen. And then the other two are just special purpose money, very similar to what we've had in the past. The federal money is going to be a little higher because there are the ESSER funds that we're receiving this year, which is a CARES Act coming from the federal government due to the pandemic. So we'll receive a little more federal funding this year than we have in previous years. There's also a second round of those funds that are coming sometime in the next few months, which we'll talk about that when we actually know what those dollar amounts are. Year-to-date expenditures. Again, we're about a third of the way through the year. You would expect that our expenditures would be somewhere near that. And the reality is for non-employee costs, sometimes you're going to be higher than that percentage because we're on a 9-month school year rather than a 12-month fiscal year. But we look at our payroll costs, we're at about 30%. So it's actually down some from where we would expect this time of the year. And that's a direct correlation to fewer in-person school days, the need for substitutes, and all the things that correspond to that. The one that's substantially down is our non-employee costs, and that's about 16% instead of, you know, the 33% that we would expect at this time, or even higher. And that's because there's just a lot less purchases and activities going on that we would, you know, there's not travel, PD, things that are happening outside that, you know, we would usually spend funds on. So we're at about 28% total budget out of the 33%. So, you know, our expenditures are showing that they're going to be down from the budgeted amount, which should help offset that revenue reduction that we're going to see. And then the bottom part is on the left is payroll costs. And you can see they're quite similar to last year. They're down a little bit, but not substantial. But it's the non-employee costs on the right-hand side that are substantially lower than they would be at this time of the year. The one in the lower middle is just our monthly expenditures, and it kind of gives you the pattern of what we normally would see. And thing you see in that, when you look to the far right, you see a big drop off last year, which isn't something that you would normally see. And that had to do with the fact that we weren't open and operating like we normally would. If we add encumbrances onto it, encumbrances are the costs that we know we have. It's payroll costs that we have contracts for that won't be paid out until, you know, the end of August. And also for non-employee costs that we have purchase orders for that we haven't paid. So if we add those two together, you'll see that our payroll costs are about 88%, our non-employee costs about 52% for a total of 82.5%. And then the bottom left and bottom right are basically the same thing. They just are a breakdown. We have lots of different ways that we look at our expenditures in school districts. And one of those is called object codes. And those object codes are our certificated costs, our classified employee costs, our benefits and taxes that are tied to those salaries. And then there's supplies, services, and travel. And you see the three on the left are salaries and benefits. And that's where the majority of our money is being spent at this particular time. And this is just a quick look at, you know, how do our revenue and expenditures match up on a monthly basis. And see September, they're about the same. October, we had a levy collection, so we received more revenue. And then in November, we spent more money than we received. So we see this pattern throughout the year. It isn't always that we get exactly what we spend on a monthly basis. Our expenditures are fairly similar on a monthly basis, but OSBI has a funding formula that changes the percentage from 6% to 10% depending on the month. So it's not always the same dollar amount coming in, which is one of the reasons you talk about having a fund balance. Our current fund balance is about $4.3 million in December. Again, much higher at the beginning of the year, and that had to do with the closure in the spring and the lack of some of the activities that we normally would have. balance sheet is for the general fund, and it's just a quick look at assets and liabilities and how does it make up that fund balance. And assets are things like the cash we have in the bank, subtract warrants that are outstanding that haven't been cashed yet, taxes receivable. So there's levy funds that haven't been collected that we collected later in the year, any receivables from OSPI, federal government, wherever we might be getting money that we've actually spent the funds but haven't received the reimbursement for. And then the liabilities is also taxes receivable, it's a liability. And then just any other things that we owe, accounts payable, et cetera. And those are actually inconsequential. There's not a lot of those. And that's how we come up with our fund balance. And we have that for the general fund, the capital projects, debt service, ASB, transportation vehicle fund, and also the private purpose trust fund. So it'll give you a fund balance for each one of those accounts. And if we look at those other accounts real quickly, capital projects fund has a current fund balance of about $1.6 million in there. We do have projects going on and things that are ordered, but this pandemic has slowed down some of the processes we normally would do, especially in the capital area for buildings, because it was hard for a while to get people to come in and do work. Debt service fund has about $78,000, which was a transfer from the capital projects fund to pay off a loan we have, and the next payment will be in December for that, and it takes up majority of that dollar amount. ASB currently has about $42,000 in it. The transportation vehicle fund about $212,000, so we will be ordering at least one school bus this school year. And the private purpose trust fund has almost $790,000 in it, and that's a fund that we can only use the interest. The principal stays intact by request of the donors in their contract. Any questions I could answer for you along the line?
I got a couple for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we have some new board members here and people in the audience, receiving funds from the state, is that based on student enrollment, is that prorated, or is that just twice a year that they make an adjustment, once in January and once in July, for example?
No, they start making adjustments in January, and they will make an adjustment every month until we hit June. So as we report enrollment September through December, they will use that number to create a funding formula for January and say that, you know, it's $12 million for basic education, 1.8 million for special ed, whatever it is, the formula calculates. And it's a formula that's just based on FTE and dollar amounts that the legislatures determine per student. And then in February, they'll take September through January, they will readjust that count and then recalculate again. Same thing through March, April, May. And finally we hit June, we get our last count. And that's when we actually know how much we have received, we should receive for the previous 9 months. So that's our final number, but it doesn't happen until June. It is a calculation from January through June.
And then my second question is based on student enrollment. We're down just about 50 students right now. What are you projecting us to end the year with?
I think if we went back and looked at that chart that had the little graph with the dotted line on there, I think it'll probably, the average would be closer to maybe 60, 65. You know, it's hard to say. I'll have a much better idea when we get the February count, because it will incorporate the second semester at the secondary level. That is sometimes where we see a change as kids have fulfilled requirements or moved to Running Start, or some things happen at that point. So next month I should have a fairly solid idea, but my guess right now we're going to be down 60 to 65.
So what I was doing there for the new people here and the people in the audience was letting everybody know that Dan stays on top of this. It was probably not a surprise for him to have me ask these questions. I'm sure he already knew the answers before I even asked. So, but that's why I asked, so that everybody knows that he's on top of it and the district is also on top of that.
Yeah, we were aware of this once we hit September and had a starting number. And, the pattern isn't that different than it has been previous years. Sometimes you get a little bit of fluctuation, but the fluctuation might be 10 kids. So it was pretty obvious early on where we're going with this. And just so people know, why do we talk about student FTE? Well, as a rough rule of thumb, for every student we have that's a 1.0 FTE, we get about $10,000 from the state. So if you have 50 fewer kids, you get, $500,000 less than what you had, budgeted for. So they don't pay us, well, they pay us originally on the budget, but then they readjust in January and pay us on actual. So it really comes down to how many kids we have sitting, in the seat or the virtual seat right now.
And do you have a point at which you think you'll be able to estimate the effects of the lower enrollment on our fund balance?
Yes, I think I can do that by next month because I'll have a better idea where I believe enrollment's going to be. I have a pretty good idea where I think expenditures are going to be. I think what we're seeing is a pattern here that looks pretty realistic. So I think we can have that. The only question I don't know at this time has to do with transportation funding for our yellow school buses. We have budgeted $830,000 based upon the previous year's experience in ridership. Well, we don't have the same ridership numbers this year. Where last year we'd have 1,283 kids reported, 3 times a year. Our last report reported 78 kids. So there's the expectation that if they continue with the formula they have, that our funding for that will be cut in half. There's been a lot of talk about how do you backfill that at the state level, and I know they're working on it, and I think it's a possibility. So that could potentially, there's a $500,000 effect there. I think they're going to fix it. That's just my gut feeling with this, that they have federal funding that they might be willing to do something with, but it takes the legislature to vote on that and how it's used. But I know there's bills out there to try to solve this problem because everybody understands that not funding the transportation department causes a problem, especially when we come back next year. And part of it's predicated upon your previous year's ridership. So you get less revenue, but you have a full running operation. So how do you fund that? So there's been a lot of concern and a lot of talk at the state level about solving that. That's the one piece that I don't have a very definite answer for. I've seen a lot of information on it, but until they tell us for sure what's going to happen, that's the only question I'm going to have. But I'm pretty sure by next month I can give you where I believe our regular revenue, our expenditures are, and what our balance is going to be. But looking at expenditures, I think the decrease in expenditures are probably as great as the decrease in revenue.
Okay.
And we had budgeted to spend $500,000 of fund balance. And now the question is, does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get an idea on when you might have an idea on that. And I think next month is wonderful if you could do that. And if not, the month after that would be great. We do have 2 questions that I think are important ones on the budget from the community. Chantel Petty asked, I've been told that there are no funds for sports this year. Can you speak as to what that is or how we will have sports with no funds? So that's probably a question more for Dr. Moshe, but still on this. And associated with that, Olivia Batchelor asked, it's been wonderful that coaches have been giving so much of their time to our student athletes. I truly believe it helps their mental health as much as their physical. However, this has been done with no pay to coaches. With the preseason coaching and fall sports coming, it's come to my attention that sports are in a budget freeze. How can we afford a raise over the pay of our free laboring coaches as well as a freeze in the equipment budget?
So I'm not sure of that information and where it's coming from. We spoke with Paul, our athletic director. We have a plan for sports. Sports are not in a freeze. It is our intention to pay our coaches 70% of the salary. We expect a 6-week season, but we're paying our coaches for high school athletics, whether or not there's a season, just because they have been working with our students, thankfully, all this time. So that's number one. Number two, middle school sports. We have arranged for a single coach to do some activities with middle school students. They won't be competing. We're still not sure if our high school students are going to get to compete based on COVID, but there'll be a stipend for individual coaches who work with small groups of kids, and Paul is in charge of that. So we haven't, Dan, I don't know if you know where that might be coming from, but we didn't freeze funding for athletics. So
No, we haven't. If we have the opportunity for our kids to participate, we'll pay for it. That's not,
Okay.
there's never been a conversation about not doing that.
So yeah, again, I'm not sure. Now, when we originally hired coaches, I mean, it might come from this. We said, hey, last year, for example, we didn't have a spring season. When we hired on this year, we said, if we're not having a season, there may not be pay. But no, our folks are going to get 70% of the salary, whether they compete or not, whether our students are even getting to participate, because they've been doing the work with kids. So,
Yeah, I think that the conversation about that was that coaches are classified employees, which means they're hourly employees. So if there is no season and they're not working with kids, that legally we can't pay them. But they have, those that have been working with kids, we certainly are going to pay.
right. The other thing that may have, again, I'm just trying to chase down where that might be coming from. ASB funding is nil. I mean, they may go into the red in terms of ASB. You know, we're trying to determine based on the rules what that means in terms of, are there ASB cards? You know, can we just fund things that ASB would typically fund? Like, you know, they would front the yearbook cost. So can we front the yearbook cost and then from the general fund and so on? Because ASB doesn't have funding because they haven't been able to do any fundraising. So we're working on ways to accommodate that, but Dan can speak to the ASB issue more clearly because, you know, he's following the budget. So Dan, I know it's close to being in the red.
Yeah, the high school ASB has a very small fund balance at the moment. And that's due largely to the fact that last year there was no spring activity. And so we refunded all the fees to anybody that had paid. And then there was no football season or fall sports that normally would do fundraising in August to generate more revenue. So this time there really is no funds available in the high school ASB. That really has nothing to do with extracurricular activities, whether we participate or not. It's just that we can't pay things out of the high school ASB until we figure out a way to get some funding in there and we get more activity. But certainly, if we have opportunities for our kids to participate,
Right.
it's not a money issue.
So, and I'm getting a communication here from Paul, basically saying that the comment regarding the freeze has to be about the ASB funds because those funds are frozen because they don't exist. There's no gate revenue for games and so on. So that, I think that may be where it's coming from.
Thank you. Good to get that information out there. Are there any other questions from the board or the public on the financials? Okay.
No,
Thank
there's
you.
one last thing I need to share with you, and that's the IRS rate. Not that we're using this at the moment, but if we were to, it's a board policy that I report every January what the current rate is, which is the reimbursement rate that we would pay employees. They use their vehicle for district purpose. And it's 56 cents per mile, which is 1.5 cents less than it was last year, but that's the amount.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pullman. Clear and forward thinking as always. Next on the agenda is the student board members report. Jordan, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, okay. So starting with the elementary school this month, they had a assembly honoring Martin Luther King Jr. And for the month of February, they're planning on doing a random acts of kindness week. And they're gonna have an assembly / webinar in preparation for that. Moving on to more high school. We kind of just talked about this, but this is from the update from January 19th, how we are planning for fall sports to start February 10th for football and then February 15th for all the other fall sports. And a lot of students are excited, especially since this is possibly one of the first things that we've ever done that's not been virtually this year. So that's definitely going to be good. Moving on to clubs, the Model United Nations Club this year, they've already attended 2 conferences this year, and they've already had a school debate. And this Friday, they're planning to attend a 3rd conference. And before the school year ends, they're planning to attend 1 to 2 more. A lot of the members are really passionate about it. Moving on to Interact Club. Interact Club is locally sponsored by our Whitby West Side Rotary Club. And they've recently met with Whitby Homeless, and they're planning to do a food drive and clothing drive for them, and just to give back to the community. And they've also just been having guest speakers come into their meetings, allowing students to just choose their own interests. And yeah. For Day for Girls Club, this year they hold a period drive, and they were able to get over 5,000 products, and they're going to be delivering that locally to just community members in need as well. They also presented to some middle school health classes, and going into 2nd semester, I'm sure they're planning to present to others as well. Other clubs like Spanish Club and Social Justice Club and Mental Health Awareness Club, they haven't been as active as they were last year, but they've been working on getting members and getting some more passion with it. Moving on to ASB, today we had a general ASB meeting, and we talked a little bit just about hybrid and plans with that. We also talked about senior wishes and wants, and I'll go into that a little bit later. And we also have a leadership opportunity for students to attend to just learn about time management and other things like that. Moving on to more general information, we had the opportunity for Erin Jones to come present to the middle school and the high school. And she was able to share her story and teach us a little bit about equity. And she's been working with the staff with equity, so it's been great from a student to finally learn about her and her story a little bit more. And I think a lot of students enjoyed it. Yesterday, a lot of juniors took the PSAT, the practice test for the SAT, so that's something that's coming up for juniors. As we go into 2nd semester, which it starts next Monday, a lot of the students said that they were stressed and overwhelmed with 1st semester, especially since it was all virtually. And some of them are also stressed for 2nd semester, but a lot of them are feeling accomplished with 1st semester, and they're excited for a new start and just new classes as well. I asked some seniors about their concerns and how they felt going into 2nd semester. And a lot of them, one of their main concern or idea that they wanted was to have a senior event before graduation, something like prom, but not exactly prom. I wouldn't know the possibility with that. But another thing that they had a concern about was remote learning. A lot of them are struggling, and I think I can say that for almost everyone, that they're struggling throughout remote learning. But some of the seniors had a concern of priority of seniors and if we do get back to hybrid for high school, a lot of them said that it would help with their mental health, and it would just be something nice to do before graduation. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was just struggling with communication. I've got a lot of feedback from students. A lot of them are saying that they've been struggling with communication, whether it's just like receiving news from the district or the school itself. A lot of them have been saying their only communication about school events, such as like the PSAT, has been through their teachers.
Thank you. That was a fantastic report. I loved how you brought in things from the elementary school in particular, and I could tell you'd gotten a good feel for what some of the other students are talking about, and that was fantastic. Any other board members have any comments or questions for Jordan?
I just want to say thank you. I feel like that added a lot of texture to my understanding of the student experience because I only have 2 student voices in my home. So I'm really grateful. And it sounds like you did a lot of work to get multiple perspectives. Thanks.
We do have a question here for you, Jordan, and for Dr. Moshe also. Gwendy Hastings asks or says, "Great report, Jordan. Are there any clubs in the high school for drug or alcohol prevention?"
Not that I know of. Most of the clubs that are at the high school are student-led, so they have to be driven by student interest. And if there were students that were interested in that, that's definitely a possibility.
Jordan answered it.
Yeah, thank you. That was comprehensive and useful for me, and as Marnie said, useful for her as well. Yeah. Chantel Petty had wanted to say thank you for the response, and I'm going back to the last thing before we move on to the hybrid question. So does having no ASB funds mean there's no money for equipment, et cetera? I'm unsure of how the money works. Maybe that is why people think there's no money for sports.
Again, I would suggest that she go back to Paul Lagerstadt, the athletic director, and he can help explain that. Regarding ASB,
Okay.
Because there are different ways to acquire equipment and so on. So.
Yep, wonderful, thank you. Okay, that is the student report. Thank you, Jordan. And now we move on to the superintendent's report.
I'm going to just share my screen.
And as you are answering these, there are the 3 questions there that we've been holding over. If you want to.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful, Brooke, if you let me present. I think I may incorporate some of those questions as I make the report, but certainly if we get to the end and I haven't, I'm happy to. So again, I'm taking you through the same process. We are, as we all know, in a pandemic that is the backdrop for everything we're talking about. This is our update for January 27th. I want to really emphasize our goals. First and foremost, it's the safety of students and staff. We have been moving based on science, and I believe doing so in a very safe manner. We do want to continue that, and we also want to continue to provide an education for our students. And with both of those goals being said, I want to be really clear that I think down to every single teacher, every person who works in the district wants nothing more than to be back face-to-face with our students. We understand that students and families are overwhelmed. We keep trying to balance their academic needs and their social emotional needs by providing as much support as possible in a virtual environment. By no means do we think that this is a good situation because we're in the midst of a global pandemic, but it is the best situation we've been able to come up with to keep our students moving forward and to keep everyone safe. So at this moment, we know that we have kindergarten, student with special needs, and students at greatest risk in school. Since we met last with the board, my instruction to the administrators was to plan. This is not a matter of if we return, this is a matter of when we're going to return. So it really doesn't matter if when we believe we're returning. I want everything set to go so that we can, with a week's notice, bring students in at whatever level and move forward. And I am happy to tell you that that work is being done and is clearly, they are ready. And I spoke with the admin team again. They are ready logistically to bring back our 1st through 4th grade. The hallways are marked. The nurse's office is ready. They have a quarantine spot. They know how to take health attestations. They're ready to take temperatures. They are, classes are divided so that kids are in cohorts, so on and so forth. So we are logistically planning and have a ready plan to return a grade level a week. You know, we have done things like we have a air purifier going into every single room in the district. We have the appropriate protective equipment on hand, including N95s. We have face masks for, the face shields for folks as well as masks. So we feel prepared. So that is not, that should not be a factor in our decision-making. COVID is a factor in our decision-making. I went through this the last time we met. Our state is now divided into regions. We are in the North region. There are 4 metrics that the region needs to meet in order to move on to phase 2, which allows for more activity. We know, and we've talked about the fact that schools are separated in terms of what they have to meet for metrics and what we have to be able to do, but we're inextricably linked. So we can't lose sight of that as we look at what we're doing. So here's our North region: Whatcom, Skagit, San Juan, and Island County. We know we need to meet these metrics to get out of phase 1. Decreasing trend in the 14-day rate per 100,000. That's the number we're used to seeing. Decreasing trend in new COVID admissions, ICU beds, and the positivity rate. So where are we? Here we are in the North region. If you look back at my presentation 2 weeks ago, dark blue is not good. Light blue is what we want to see. We need all 4 of these in light blue to be able to move to phase 2. The last time we met, 3 of these were light blue and only 1 was dark blue, this one. Again, we know the data is 2 weeks old, but this is what the state goes by. So as of 1/25, just 2 days ago, we are not meeting 2 of 4 metrics. So school rules are different. We have to use the guidance that came out from the Department of Health, Washington Department of Health, based on updated science. Again, this is key. The mitigation efforts, those logistics I talked about, are essential to us being successful. And I want to just take a moment here and emphasize to folks what we see and what we're doing with our students. So when students come back to school, let's talk about the elementary because they would be first out of the gate. Students will wear masks while they're in school for all 4 hours, except when they are eating. And when they are eating, they will be outside and socially distanced. So they won't be with their peers. They will be away from each other in order to eat. So that 6 feet of distance also happens in the classroom. So I know we probably all know this intuitively, but students would be in school a total of 8 hours a week, Monday, Tuesday, 4 hours each day, and then 3 days remote. And it won't look like what school would normally look like. And that is regardless of level. So it's just, it's a hard concept until you see it to know that what we're talking about. So here are the metrics for schools. Up to 350 cases is moderate per 100,000. We were seeing that in the beginning, if you'll remember, Low was less than 25, moderate was up to 75, and high was above 75. That changed just before the winter break to less than 350 cases is moderate. The positivity of 5 to 10%, the trends in cases and hospitalizations. So where are we on these metrics, which are similar but a little bit different? So here's Island County, and that's closest to us, right? This is where we live. So even though we're in the North region, we want to look at what we're doing. Good news is we did trend down this week. So this 2-week period between January 10th and January 23rd, we did see a trend down, but we're still, over 100 cases per 100,000. The good news is we're seeing a couple of ticks down here. So if that trend continues, that of course is good news. This study was done out in Wisconsin and came through the CDC. And I just wanted to make sure again that we're providing balanced information. So this is about a study that they did over 13 weeks of 17 K-12 schools. Okay, it was rural Wisconsin. So they had about 4,900 students and 650 staff. With the mitigation in place, masks, cohort grouping, socially distance, and of course the use of quarantine for exposure, they found no spread is known to have occurred to or from staff in school. Want to be really clear because the health department, when we met for our call this morning, brought this particular study up. The CDC did report it, and I'm providing you with this information. It is not peer reviewed, so it is anecdotal. It's just another point of reference for you as you make your decisions. I went through this last time. We don't have to go through it in quite as much detail, but we do have plans in place for staff in terms of response. And we put together a handbook that will go to families so that as students return, they know what is expected of them. We are in a situation where it's zero tolerance for the inability, unless it's due to disability, the student not wearing a mask. If the student refuses to wear a mask, the student will need to remain on remote instruction because we need to be able to maintain that in school. And they believe in the studies that are done that the most important thing in stopping COVID from spreading in schools is following all of the protocol. So it's essential that we can do that. Incidentally, we haven't had a case in school yet over the time we've been in school. So that is good news. So what we must do, what we're required to do, obviously protect staff and students at higher risk. Our drop off we talked about, our grouping of students. This is a really important point because once you get to past 4th grade, we cannot cohort kids. They change classes. They will pass in the hallways. They will be in one group for a 60-minute or 50-minute period, and then they will move to another group. And teachers potentially at that level would see 60 students in a day, unlike their elementary counterpart who may see 20 in a day or even less. So important to just, again, have on your mind. Distancing, hand washing, all of the things that we know about. And as I said to you, we have the elementary level in particular, our HVAC system is new, but we regardless are putting in air purifiers in every single room. And the purchase of PPE and these kinds of items, we have asked teachers what they believe they need to feel safe, and we are providing that for them. And then we talked last time about our ability to respond. Our nurses are confident that they can respond, that they can put students in a safe spot to wait if they should have any symptoms. We have a method for checking students in at the door at the elementary level, checking temperatures, making sure the health attestation is there, and so on. So we are ready to react. And the health department, as you heard from Keith at the last meeting, believes that they can support the district in contact tracing and monitoring health and so on and so forth. Once again, we're talking about the logistics, and we believe we can handle the logistics. We've talked about our face-to-face instruction and what that would look like, what the hybrid model looks like. So the K4 has really put the logistics together for who's in what class. And the 5 through 12 has some time based on our modeling. So they are continuing to work on it, but they're confident that that they'll get their schedules worked out in the next few weeks. Now we come to the part that is the stuff that we really need to talk about is what are we going to do? So we know we have everything in place and are ready, but what about the vaccine? What about the fact that we've come this far safely? We are listed as priority 1B, 2, 3, and 4. They've lumped all of the school staff into this 2, 3, and 4. In talking with the health department this morning, it's pretty clear that we have a much bigger demand than we do supply of vaccine. We have 84,000 folks on this island, and they were talking about like 1,000 vaccines coming in. You know, and how they were going to distribute that. If you saw the press release today, Whidbey Health is, you know, they're not doing vaccines. They don't have a supply. Island Drug has a little bit more supply. We're still in conversation with Safeway about getting a clinic here. There are 3 more vaccines coming, Johnson & Johnson being one of them, with the single shot for their vaccination as opposed to 2. Our plan is to still vaccinate staff as soon as it's available. It was supposed to be, you know, as early as now through the end of February. It's looking more like 6 weeks as of my conversation this morning. So the vaccine is still out there as, you know, in terms of the date. I do want to talk to you about staff and about where we are in terms of being able to staff our programs. So we talked about how we've distributed kids, and we've talked about being ready logistically. Being able to staff, it's another matter. And we have been walking and will continue to walk arm in arm with our staff forward. I have heard from both of our classified staff unions with questions about, you know, can we wait until there is a vaccine? What are we doing? I just want to share with you SWIA's perspective. And I know you can see my screen. So I'm going to stop the share for a second so I can pull this up and actually read it to you. So SWIA is the South Whidbey Education Association. That is our teaching group. That is the largest group that we have in terms of our union and our frontline, our essential workers. The SWIA would like the board to know how much we appreciate and support and willingness of the district to listen to the staff and collaborate with us as we work through the challenges of meeting the needs of our students in these difficult times. As educators, students are the heart of everything we do, and there is nothing we want more than to be back with our students face to face. That being said, we are conflicted. We have wrestled daily with our desire to be with students while weighing the risks of returning to on-site work. Our conversations and member surveys show that there are a dominant number of members that are concerned with their safety and the safety of all. A majority of members do not want to return without a vaccine or unless there is a significant decline in COVID cases. We are concerned that the potential gains to be made would not outweigh the risks to students and staff. We look forward to continuing to work with the district to find creative ways to serve our students while maintaining our commitment to the safety of all. This may include expanding on programs with staff that are comfortable returning before vaccines are available. Thank you for your thoughtful and careful consideration. Val Brown, Becky Ward, Robin Roberts, South Whidbey leadership team. So again, I just want to be really clear on where we are and where our staff are. I'm going to just go back to my share. So we've heard SWIA's perspective. I want to be clear on my recommendations to the board because, again, we need to be able to meet the needs of our students and keep everyone safe. We are continuing to provide the instruction that I talked about with kindergarten, students with special needs, and our next group of at-risk students. I would like to continue moving forward, but as teachers feel comfortable moving forward by the individual. There are some teachers, and this is true more than just district-wide, there are some teachers across the state who feel like they can return safely. And there are others who, and I believe the last I heard, I had at least 10 staff who were planning to take a leave if they were instructed to return. So I know it's more waiting for families, and I know that that's very, very difficult. But I would recommend that we wait. We have come this far and we've done it safely. And does the hybrid instruction outweigh the risks? I know that doesn't make me popular, but it certainly is what my core tells me. I can't recommend to you that we move forward full bore with bringing our first graders back on the 8th and continuing to move forward when we are still seeing high numbers in terms of COVID cases. We have new strains. I can't imagine being that afraid for my own health and being able to teach students in a classroom. And it's not just a few now, it's many of our teachers, and we've seen it statewide. And I also can make the argument that there are probably 40 of our 50 states have opened more. Districts in Eastern Washington have been open. I will respect whatever the board determines, and there is no right answer. And that is what we have been seeing. So I leave it to the board now. I will answer any questions happily. It's been a very, very difficult decision to recommend that to you, but I believe with my heart that it's the right recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Moshe, for the presentation and the up to the almost minute information that you've been able to provide for us. I especially appreciate you reaching out to the unions to get commentary from them as well, so we know how the wonderful staff in our district feel about things. Any questions from the board before we look into some of these community questions?
May I just offer a brief reflection? I want to thank you, Dr. Moshe, for that presentation. And I want to reflect that some of the solutions or interventions that have been recommended by community members around providing ways for students to feel connected and supported could be a complement to a necessary pause on the return to hybrid learning. And I just want to express gratitude for all the people who are putting on their creative thinking caps around how to support students without returning to in-person learning in a hasty fashion.
I would like to say that I understand that this can be a very stressful time, but we hired you to do a job, and I'm very impressed with what you're laying out. But when you were talking about some of the staff that have put in that if we return, that they will take a leave of absence. I'm just curious if we have any discussions along those lines, if those would be something that we need to do in an executive session.
So we have an approved memorandum of understanding with our teachers union. And there are provisions for leave that are outlined that staff would be able to utilize. Individual requests for leave, if they fall under the MOU, would not require the board's approval because you approved the MOU. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody knew what we were, had a framework of what we were working under.
Yes, and we keep people's information, private, confidential. However, if a teacher is not working with a group of kids in school, that it would become known that they had taken a leave. So again, I want to, these are folks, these are our staff, right? These are our folks that are struggling with their own dilemma on whether it's their personal health or the health of their family, or they have, they're in a household, whatever it is. I think, the idea of being able to wait for a vaccine for those who are unable to return at this time by not, saying we're coming back on Monday, come what may. It's a calculated risk that we're taking, right? We take calculated risks in our lives all the time. But we are able to do that as individuals, right? We get behind the wheel of the car and we're taking a risk, but it's an increased risk when you get behind the wheel of the car and, it's dense fog and it's pouring down rain and it's a windstorm and, there are limbs falling. Most people would want to wait the storm out. And I think that's what we're hearing when we're this close to getting a vaccine, but we also hear from our families saying, students need to be in school. And I ask that we look at that realistically, because we're not talking about students being in school 5 days a week, 6.5 hours a day. So it's not that students are back in school. We're talking about 2 4-hour days a week. So we're talking about 8 hours. So the social emotional is very real, to be able to allow kids to connect with teachers and to be in school and have some semblance of order. But to Marnie's point, do we mitigate the social emotional needs in some other way, as opposed to, groups of kids in classrooms? And we are working on ways to do that with teacher connection. And we do have teachers who are willing to be in with students. It's just not going to work out as plainly as, first grade comes back and then second grade and then third grade if we don't have the numbers. The other piece of this is, and we might be putting the cart ahead of the horse, is the metrics right now are not speaking to, let's return. They're still on the rise, even though we're seeing a little bit of a dip. So that's another factor. It may be a wait and see, let's look at it again in 2 weeks, but
Yeah, I want to make sure that it's clear, this is not all on the staff. As Joe was just saying, the metrics are still rising. The cases and one of the other cases per 100,000, one of the other ones are still on the rise, which, as Joe said before, that this is not indicative of opening until these numbers change course. And that's science. That is the metrics we've been given by the state.
And you know, to the point of, I am doing the best I can to manage the science that's coming to us. So it's hard for us to reconcile. We're in phase 1 as a community. We haven't met these metrics as a community, yet schools are under different guidelines and therefore can open because we can put mitigation measures in place. Kids can wear masks. We can control the environment to a point more than you can control people in a supermarket. So I get that part too. You know, to the parents out there that are saying, hey, you know, but we're being told schools can't open. I hear the same information. I don't deny that. It's a matter of weighing, and it's not on the staff. I made the recommendation. So if it's on anyone, it's on the superintendent. But I'm listening to the staff. I hear the families and I hear the students very articulately saying, we're under a lot of pressure. It's overwhelming. I don't like remote instruction. I hear all of that. And I honor that. You know, again, this is the superintendent making a recommendation, and the board then, you know, with all of the facts, provides the guidance.
Anne or Jordan, do either of you have anything you'd like to chime in with?
No, I think everything I really echo what Marnie said, and you know, the science is in front of us. It's always changing. You know, we absolutely recognize all the moving parts, and these are very, very hard decisions that each of us is making as an individual, as well, you know, collectively as a community, as well as, you know, as the collective. We need to take care of each other. And so figuring out the best way to do that is the imperative this evening.
I'll add one more thing, Joe, which is why I'm impressed and I'm at a loss of words here for what how I want to articulate it, but the decision-making process you have to go through is very similar to someone maybe who's picking up garbage, or the flight attendants, or the nurses and doctors that are out on the front line, and our first responders that are on the first line. And even I have to, you know, as an essential employee, have to put it out there and go to Canada or go to Montana and places that, you know, I'd rather be home too. So I understand your decision-making process, and I commend you for making the tough decision. I appreciate your efforts in this, because I think there's a lot of people to be appreciated, and that includes educators who step up and are willing to do that as well. I know, like I said, I'd rather be at home. I'm sure they'd rather be at home. I think a lot of people would rather be at home. So I appreciate everybody's efforts here. That's commendable.
We do have 17 Q&A notes there. Jordan, do you have anything you'd like to add before we move on to those? No? Okay, I'm not, since we have 17 of them, I'm not going to try to group them. I'm just going to run through in the order that they came in. First of all, Deborah Davies notes, as a teacher in this district, I do not feel safe returning to school until staff can be vaccinated. Our community and school has done a good job thus far keeping our COVID numbers down. We are so close to a vaccination. Why would we jeopardize staff, students, families, or our community at this point? We miss our kids and want to be at school when the time is right, but the time is not right yet. Please wait for vaccines. Some of these are just going to be statements, and I'm going to simply read them. If anyone has any responses, please jump in. And I will go ahead of time and thank you everyone for chiming in. Honestly, hearing feedback from the community is incredibly important to our job. So I'm going to give a blanket thanks now and try to move through these so that we aren't here for 3.5 hours. Gwendy Hastings, I know we have a seminar coming up about suicide prevention. What is the district doing to be proactive to get students the social emotional that they need? For example, peer Zoom chat, social opportunities via internet. I know that Marnie mentioned that as well. Dr. Moshe, do we have anything on there to?
We certainly are doing work through our teachers on that very topic and our counselors, but I would suggest that you let me come back to you and let you know exactly what we're doing rather than just give you the anecdotal notes that are in my head.
Absolutely. And I do want to note for those who have submitted questions and those who are listening, there may be some things where we don't have an answer immediately, like this one. If you would like to get an answer sooner than the next board meeting, please send an email in to the board and to Dr. Moshe, and we will get a response back to you. So like Dr. Moshe said, we want to get the proper data, the proper, all the details. So there may be some that we request that you email in or get back to you next meeting. Gwendy Hastings, I do have another question when it is an appropriate time. As a Southwood Beach School District employee, I got an email about getting vaccinations done. Is there an update? My main concern is having staff get vaccinations that are not planned on going back to providing in-person instruction. There are other districts that are only offering vaccinations for staff that are only to the ones who are planning to return to work in person. I completely understand that this is an individual decision, but we need to put priority on those that will be exposed to the public, especially with recent issues with would-be health vaccinations process. Also, I don't think teachers should get vaccinations before the first phase of individuals that were eligible because of their age. So the question there amidst the comment is has there been anything set up to prioritize those staff who are going to be in person first?
So my understanding from the health department this morning is that the 1B tier 2, 3, and 4, which had previously been prioritized and school staff was prioritized in that by age and so on, they've grouped it as 1. And the vaccine, once 50% of the tier 1B is met, which is the 1A being the first responders and so on, 1B being 65 and older and multi-generational households. Once that is 50% met, they will open it up to the tier 1B, 2, 3, and 4. Again, my understanding of our vaccine clinic is that if you have a school ID and have been receiving a paycheck from the district, you are eligible to receive the vaccine. That includes our board members. But if there's not enough vaccine, there certainly may be a way to prioritize our own local staff and our own local clinic. But what I'm assured by the Safeway folks that are the ones that are going to run this clinic when it finally happens is that they will bring enough to vaccinate everyone. This is what I know. Because I've asked the question, I've been given the answer. I'm not in charge of the clinic, so to speak.
It may change, basically.
Yes, this is what I know at this moment.
Yeah, and in fact, the scientific understanding and the facts around all of this is clearly changing rapidly.
Yep.
And
I did want to note, though, to Gwendy's question about the suicide prevention, we have been using the Forefront suicide prevention in our district for several years now, and this year is no exception. And there is a parent training coming up that has been advertised. So you can take a look at our Facebook page and find information about that Forefront suicide parent training. Or if you can't find it there or you're not on Facebook, you can contact the high school.
thank you. Kimberly Taxony says the different ages are in different buildings. Has anyone considered bringing back older kids into their building as well, seeing as they don't share a building?
Not sure I understand the question.
I think it's a question about the phased from starting in elementary and then going up, since they are in separate buildings.
Yeah.
May I?
So,
May I draw our attention to another question from the same community member further down on the list,
Mhm.
where she says, you can ignore my question on high school going back because I see nobody is going.
Okay.
okay. Thank you, Marnie.
Thank you for keeping up. I have not read ahead as much as I usually do. So thank you for keeping me honest on that one. Next one, Olivia Batchelor. Jordan, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for the detailed report. You're a great student board member. It's really cool to see how involved you are. For Gwendy, there is the Drug and Alcohol Club at the high school. It's called Prevention Group. Colleen Chan runs it. They meet mostly weekly on Wednesdays. In fact, they have spent a tremendous amount of hours working on what is important student health-wise and drug and alcohol prevention. Thank you, Olivia, for passing that along. Kathy Glaze, I thought I saw her name further down, so after I read this, I'll skim down to see if there's any more information. She notes that the facts about Whidbey Health are incorrect. The fact that the state is changing how to vaccinate the masses has changed. Dr. Moshe, your information is as of this morning?
Yeah, that's what the health department, Whidbey Health, shared with me this morning. So if it's changed during the day, I apologize. There was a news release that came out that indicated that all Whidbey Health vaccines are off, but my understanding was that was Whidbey Health, not changed by the state. And Christy tells me that through the chat here, the forefront training is February 2nd, 3 p.m. via Zoom. So it is on Facebook and it went out in the Navigator.
Lindsay Krug, your survey showed a large percentage of teachers that were willing to return in February. This goes against science and Washington government recommendations. Kids should be priority and be back in person. I don't believe that it is against the Washington government recommendations given
No, not at all.
rise in rates.
So let me be clear on terms of the survey. I am working with SWIA. Yes, back in November when we surveyed staff and asked them their opinion, they said they'd be willing to come back at the beginning of second semester. And then the numbers with COVID changed, the strain changed, the science did change in terms of the vaccine being available and out for folks. So now it's closer than it was before. So SWIA surveyed their membership yesterday. And I am sharing the results of that with you, and SWIA wrote that note to you. So yeah, there are people's opinions change as time goes on.
Yeah, just like the science is being updated as
Mhm.
the science changes and as the situation changes, clearly.
Yes,
opinion-
but to clarify, in terms of the governor made it very clear that these decisions are local decisions. That he had the power to close schools, but only the school board has the power to reopen them. And so it's based on your local community and what you see as the best direction for your community.
Next comment from Gwendy Hastings. Can't we find temporary replacements for the staff that don't want to come back yet? We can't afford to wait with the mental health crisis that our students are facing. 9 and 10-year-olds are struggling with suicide. I shared an article on Facebook that has the stats on rising suicide rates for younger students. So the question about finding temporary replacements for staff who don't want to come back yet.
It's something that we've talked about. We are actively recruiting for substitutes to try and replace teachers who choose to go on leave. If if we go in that direction, we will have to, if that's what the board, if the direction that we come to tonight is, return, and here's the date, then we will work to return on that date. If the return is when there's a vaccine, or the answer is let's look again in 2 weeks, then we will act accordingly.
Brittany Winchester, I understand the risks, but it has been shown with the Christian school and the Wellington school have successfully opened and safely continued in-person education without cases, how would it be different if South Whidbey schools followed the same protocols as the other schools to return to in-person education with success?
Once again, other districts have opened, schools have opened, we have opened and have been mitigating the impact. We don't have cases, and our kindergarten teachers have been working with about 30 students 4 days a week for since we've been in. I understand that comment.
Yeah. And again, for many of these, it's going to be, thank you for your input. We'll absolutely take it into consideration as we're making our decisions on guidance. Kimberly Taxony again, you will still need to mask and distance with a vaccine. This will be going well into next fall. Hundreds of depressed youths. If some teachers are willing to return now, do we not consider the students' mental health as well? I will note in Dr. Moshe's recommendations, there was mention of bringing back some students as possible for those with those staff members who are interested in coming back immediately.
Mhm.
So there is that possibility, correct, Dr.
Yeah,
Moshe?
it will. The difference between my recommendation to bring back first grade and then second, third, fourth to what I'm recommending that we look for willing staff. Those willing staff may be at varying levels. And so, it may not be that we bring back all the first graders that want to come back. Or maybe we can, but not at second grade. We are trying to, again, we're trying to, thread the needle on accommodating the needs that our children have first and foremost, and doing it safely with our staff. So that is the direction that we can look toward. Again, we all want the same thing. We all want to come back and be there for our students. There's no argument. That's what we'd like to do. And we have been thinking about all of the options. So that's why I said to you, it could be, we could go forward and work with the mitigation. And, if staff need to take leave, then we figure out a way to sub for them. It could be that we wait for the vaccine. What I gave you was my recommendation, not, this is what we're doing. That's the discussion. That's what we have to determine.
This is I've got a note here from NB, but it does not have a name. Just as with in-person comments, need to have a name associated with the question, please. Jennifer Hajni, I'm sorry if I missed this. Were the results of the survey about returning to class shared with families yet? Do those results have any bearing on the board's decision on this matter?
So we did share with the board what our survey said of families. At the elementary level, the survey that went out indicated, do you want to return to in-person? And if, so that was one question, but if it's a choice between returning to in-person and staying with your current teacher, some people said, I want to stay with my current teacher regardless of modality. And some people chose not to come back. So Susie told me that basically she was at a 50-50 place on students that want to return to in-person, and they've worked out a schedule about 10 or 12 per section. If they can, if we can come up with the staff for that, which we would, work toward.
Lindsay Krug asked to please share the exact number of staff that won't return. Some would still remain virtual and the kids need to be a priority. I don't know that that's an appropriate personnel issue to share until it becomes an actual leave of absence.
That's
Please.
correct. That's correct.
Gwendy Hastings, over the past year, the CDC documented a 63% of 18 to 24-year-olds reporting anxiety or depression related to the pandemic, and 25% of them had considered suicide. The governor's change in metrics is because science shows that the transmission rate is not as high as they previously thought for COVID. We can't wait. And there's a further note that we've met the metrics put forward by the governor, and that is not true to my understanding. We have not.
Yeah,
made-
that's not accurate. The metric that we've met is they changed the high point on moderate to 350 cases per 100,000. And the recommendation, I can take you back there, because it's not just just come back full bore, right? Anyway, but let me go right back there so we can be real clear. I have to do
Yeah. As I recall, that recommendation on moving forward is based on meeting all of the metrics, including
Yep.
Downward trends in case rate, which we do not currently have over a long enough period.
So again, one metric up here is the case rate, and we're at about 120 for the last 14 days per 100,000 in Island County. If we used our north numbers, we might as well not have the conversation. The positivity rate we meet, but the trends in cases and hospitalizations, again, that's this trend, right? So we see the trend is up, and we see the hospital admissions is up. Our ICU beds, we meet that, and we meet the positivity rate. So we aren't meeting the metrics. Doesn't mean we wouldn't in another week or 2 weeks, right? We could. But yeah, that's a piece of it. We have to see a decreasing trend. And that would be the light blue here.
Right.
Now, and folks would say, but this brings in Whatcom and Skagit County, and we're in Island County, which is why I gave you the Island County numbers, right? So we meet the metric per 100,000, but this isn't talking about the hospitalization rate or any of that. And that we get from this slide.
Well, and also the direction of the trend is not, we don't meet that requirement, is my understanding.
We don't. So if we did,
Right.
we would be prioritizing elementary, which that's what we've been talking about. If they're not already receiving in-person learning, and middle school. So our plan when we implement is a grade a week, starting with first grade. So then 4 weeks in, we'd get to our 5, 6, and then 7, 8, 5 weeks in. And then at the 6th week, we'd bring in our 9, 12. So that is our current plan. Again, if schools can demonstrate the ability to limit transmission in the school environment, add more high school students when case rates are below about 200 per 100,000 in 14 days. So again, we meet that, but we haven't gotten here yet. So there you have it. Okay.
Comment from Lindsay Motz. Thank you, Dr. Moshe, for your support and responsiveness to staff concerns. We will always try to listen to what this staff says, just as we will parents. Two from Kathy Glaze. I'm going to read them both together since they flow. I'm absolutely frustrated. My first grader was looking forward to returning. My understanding is that all the first grade staff did not perform Zoom meetings this week so they can be prepared for return. Was that all a waste of time? Even Governor Inslee stated today per Cairo 7 that asking educators to return isn't asking more than we've asked of our grocery clerks. The next comment from the same community member is, I think your decision is a very affluent decision. I'm very happy that you're able to work from home and make a very substantial salary. I am required to go to work and take care of COVID positive patients where social distancing is not allowed. I even have patients with their secretions. Staff get to go to school, enforce masks, health attestations, and social distancing. What more of a controlled environment could you ask for? I recognize and understand the frustration. I absolutely do. And it's something that is weighing on my decision for sure. Dr. Moshe, can you comment on the staff not doing Zoom meetings this week to prepare for the return and what you think that's gained us?
So it's what Susie and I talked about was giving staff the time to adjust to hybrid. So they wouldn't have to do that again. We're giving people time before we go to the next grade level. So first grade had its time. Second grade would have its time the prior week to second grade beginning and so on. So that is our intention. Once again, I still don't know if we're returning or we're not, right? This is a decision that we're making this evening. So if we are returning on the 8th, they need to be ready to return on the 8th.
And I'd just like to note that I very much appreciate that preparation to make sure that we are ready as soon as we're able to get back. Brittany Winchester, to add to my previous comment, why isn't the other local school's success in being on campus since September being considered along with our school's potential return to school? I would say it is being considered alongside the numbers, the metrics presenting countywide.
That's correct.
Chantel Petty, factors on my mind, kids first. Doctors say kids need to go back. Social emotional is imperative. Kids say they need to go back. Education is not at all rigorous enough virtually. Kids are becoming less engaged as the year goes on. Other districts, private schools have been going in and doing fine. Maybe teachers that don't want to come back can be the virtual teachers. The CDC has admitted that tests are giving false results, so maybe it is not as reliable as was thought. I would say that we are considering, as we mentioned earlier, that we are talking about possibly allowing the teachers that don't want to come back to be virtual teachers, assuming we can still staff those classes that would be in person. And I don't, yeah, that's logistical details that Dr. Moshe will and the administrators will absolutely figure out if we choose, as soon as we choose to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree that we absolutely want to get people, as we've said several times and will continue to say, because it is absolutely true, is we want the kids back in the buildings as soon as we safely can. I don't know Mrs. Matthews' name. S.
Charlotte.
Matthews is one of our teachers.
Charlotte Matthews.
Okay. Like most teachers, I do not want to return until fully vaccinated. I've had my first jab at Would Be Health. I've enjoyed working with my students remotely and in SWAP, and most of them have shown good progress. We all just want to be safe. Jennifer Haney, thank you for the correction on your pronunciation. I appreciate that. Always hard to guess at names based on phonetics. What is the timeline for those staff members who are willing to return now? You've said you're thinking about it, but to what end?
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
We need a week's notice, right? We need to notify families. We need to set up transportation. So, you know, if that's the direction we head, then we shift gears and we start on that tomorrow. We're ready to do what we need to do.
Kimberly Taxney, can we hear how many high school families chose a return in their survey? Is that a number that you?
Where the other levels other than K4 being about 50-50 are about 70-30 wanting to come back.
Janice Powell, does this leave of absence include support staff?
Support staff have memorandums of understanding. We have one with SEIU and PSE, so they'd have to refer to their specific agreement as to what is allowable. I was referring to the agreement that we currently have with teachers, but we have them with all of our units right now.
Lindsay DeMotts, the new variant is much more contagious even among children. Countries that have experienced this new strain have been forced to close down, and it has been found in Pearson, Snohomish County. Please take this into consideration when making your decision. As with all of the data points that we know of, including that one, we'll absolutely be considering them as we're making our decisions. Gwendy Hastings, it sounds like we have staff that don't want to return, but we have parents that want to have their students return. I think that means we need to look at options for finding solutions instead of just talking about the issues. If we can look for temporary placements, let's look into that. If we have enough staff to cover some grades, let's look into that. Let's spend time finding solutions so we can get students back into their in-person classes. Can we have a follow-up meeting in 1 to 2 weeks with options how to safely return? Finding temporary teachers, finding out what teachers' grades are being covered, and make a plan. I would note that we do have a plan. In order to enact it, however, Dr. Moshe needs guidance from the board. Damien, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Brooke. Hey, Brooke, can I say something there really quick?
Absolutely.
So I keep hearing some of these things that sounds like people don't have a choice, but I felt that Joe was giving people a choice. Students that don't want to come back don't have to come back. They can still do remote learning. And teachers that do not want to come back, there might be an opportunity for them to do remote teaching as well as or take a leave of absence. So am I correct there? People have choices here, which is the beauty of this whole plan that I think that you've presented for everybody here. And so I'd like to remember that for staff and for students, you get a choice. I think that's an awesome thing. No one's forcing you to do something that you don't want to do, if that's the way I understand this correctly.
The worry, Damien, is that we won't have enough staff to meet all of the choices made by families. The other piece of this is the worry that should we return even those willing, are we being as safe as possible? That's the other piece, right? I mean, we need to make decisions not only based on what people want, but what we know to be the safe return for our students and staff. So,
right, and I get that as far as if we're following the science, the guidelines, and the protocols to be safe, that we're doing the right thing. And,
exactly, that's correct.
we always have the opportunity to change direction. A ship doesn't always have to sail west. It can turn to a different heading if need be. So there you have my 2 cents again.
Yeah, and if others, thank you, Damien. And if other school board members want to chime in, please just talk right over me and I'll shut up. Next comment, Lindsay Krug, you should be able to share percentage of how many teachers would not return, at least at the 1 to 4 level, since 50-50 of those kids want to return starting next week. You say you have been planning for this for a return as early as next Monday. If the teachers are available, then they should return. How can you not know the numbers of staff if this was supposed to happen so soon?
I didn't say we didn't know the numbers. We chose not to report the numbers of staff indicating they're not going to return. If you'd like me to report that, I mean, I believe that is potentially, identifying individuals, but I do have data on, let's see what I have. Let me just take a quick look. They're at 70% of the teachers say they don't want to return until they have a vaccine. That was their latest survey by SWIA.
Yeah, and I agree that until these are actual personnel decisions being made, the requests for leave, that information, I don't believe
Right.
that information should be shared.
Exactly. We don't know. Nobody has requested a leave yet. They've indicated that they would. And when asked if they would return, they said not until a vaccine. But really, it's just like students in a classroom, right? Here's the opportunity. Are they really going to come or not come? In terms of staff, they're telling us how they really feel. And I want to respect that. These are all very difficult conversations and very difficult choices. And we want to keep our students at the forefront. We know that they have mental health issues. We know that many families are able to support their young people quite well, and that some are not, and that regardless of the amount of support, some students are feeling very stressed and you know, are potentially expressing some thoughts that we don't want to talk about, which are suicidal thoughts. And so we are working to meet the needs of students and families. We have counselors who are working on that, teachers reaching out. We want everyone to be okay through this crisis that has impacted all of us. It is a health crisis. We know that. We're trying to sail our ship through very difficult waters. And I appreciate it when folks share their opinion that we should just be able to do this. And I'm in this seat and doing the very best I can, giving you my best recommendation based on all that I know. That doesn't mean that that this is the right, that it's the right decision. That's why there's a school board, and I give you my best educated opinion, and that's what it is based on all that I know.
I believe this next comment is from Sue Sage. Hello, Governor Inslee on CNN tonight stated that schools should open now, that there is greater risk for them to come for them at home due to depression than at school. Other schools in our region are opening. Why would this board choose its own path separate from other school districts and the governor's guidance? We have not chosen anything yet. That's what we will be doing after we're done answering questions tonight. It is up to us to decide whether we follow the metrics or those statements from the governor and what other school districts are doing. Yeah. That's the choice we have to make tonight. Gwendy Hastings, to be fully vaccinated takes 2 months. We're not talking, you're not immediately immune. That puts returning in April or May. Yes, being vaccinated does take, there is a wait time between the 2 shots. Yeah. Amanda Murphy, our teachers are a huge part of what makes our district great. They did not sign up to be nurses and they should feel safe doing such extremely important job. We fully support them if they want to wait. Lori Johnson, question for Jordan. Ready for this, Jordan? We know being out of school is hard on students and not equitably. With the exception of returning to school, what do you think students need on a social emotional level? What can we do as a community to support youth like yourself and your peers? Secondly, how can we support younger students? Is there something we can be doing outside of the return to school? I know it's not ideal, but can someone in mental health make a suggestion?
I think it's kind of hard to answer this question because I don't get the perspective of every student and I don't get the perspective of a middle schooler or a younger kid. And that just goes to show that it's clear that mental health is something that students are struggling right now, but you don't know exactly what's behind it. It could be a variety of different things. A lot of students are just struggling, not seeing their teachers and just being in school, while others are struggling trying to learn subjects, and it can be really hard learning subjects. And so I don't know if I can fully answer this question because there's so many different perspectives on why people are facing mental health. But
yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic answer. Yeah, I think that we as a community should absolutely be doing everything we can to support the social emotional learning and state of our students and families and community members who are not associated with the school district. I think that's critical during this time. I've been very upfront about the fact that I struggle with depression personally, and that this has absolutely made it more difficult for me. That that struggle has become harder. And I know that I'm not the only one on the South End associated with the school district, in the community, anything, who's struggling with mental health right now. And that's absolutely something we're taking into consideration.
I'd also just share that I've heard anecdotal evidence from students about experiences in the virtual classroom that have been very supportive and that have made them feel more connected and tuned in. And so I would just invite other students to share what has worked for them, or what would they like to feel more of through the virtual learning experience. And an email to the district from an older student, or a comment to a parent that could be emailed to the board members from a younger student would be really welcome.
Great point, Marnie. Thank you. Yes, absolutely agree. Thank you. Kimberly Taxney, if you vote to pause, we have no choice in what our students are doing. And yes, if teachers are willing and families are choosing to go back, that's what we do. That's a choice. Right now, we have very little choice unless we leave the district. Yes, we're trying to accommodate the choices that people have indicated. Community members, staff members, everyone. Gwendy Hastings, I'm talking about making a plan for returning with limited teachers and temporary teachers. Our current plan is only one option. We need to come up with other options such as temporary teachers, limited teachers, etc. There actually is a note in the plan that Dr. Moshe presented about bringing a number of students back into school as possible with the number of teachers who want to come back. So there are gradients available to us, is my understanding. I have an anonymous comment from a teacher. As with any other comment, I will only read the ones that are accompanied with a name, just as we would in public comment. Joanna Thompson, an essential thing to remember from moving around teachers that are willing to come back to in-person learning means that many teachers would have to change grade levels or positions. Not only will educators have to manage the health and safety of themselves and their students, but they would also be placed in an environment with an entirely new class, grade level, and curriculums. There are exceptional logistical difficulties with bringing back just certain teachers, especially if we try to match them to grade levels that they are not part of. But I know that that's something that Dr. Moshe and the administration have been working on finding answers to. But yes, that is absolutely a difficulty involved in this process. The previous comment attributed to Sue Sage was not actually from her. So apologies for misattributing that. There was an anonymous comment, and then Sue Sage was claiming responsibility for a comment, and I got that mixed up. My apologies. She says, thank you for your deliberation on these difficult issues. I hear a lot of discussion about the anxiety of older students who will be last to enter. My students are very engaged in learning well. Lori Johnson, I appreciate your perspective, not to put you on the spot. I believe that's for you, Jordan. If you think of a suggestion, we appreciate hearing from youth about what would help them outside of the return to school. Absolutely. I agree quite. Let's see here. Karen Plouffe, after staying put for almost a year and having spent time in the ICU unit in Everett, seeing what is going on, I'm one of the teachers who is not comfortable going back without the shots. That said, I do miss the kids. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. Kathy Glaze, we are not asking teachers to be nurses. That is an absolutely unfair comparison. What you are saying is that there is no faith or trust in the community parents, that we as parents are willing to send our children to school with any illness at this time. I don't, I don't believe that we are saying that there is no faith or trust in the community or parents. I think that we understand that you want what you feel is best for your children, and we all want what we feel is best for the children, and the staff, and the community. And we're, yeah. I don't know how else to address that, but noting, thanking you for putting out your opinion. Oh, to clarify from Kathy, I hear a lot of teachers say, well, parents send their kids in sick no matter what the policy is. I haven't heard that statement, which doesn't mean it isn't happening. I would be, yeah. Thank you for providing that information. Last one that we currently have, 52 of 52. Kristen Coda. I'm a teacher and I'm teaching in person now at K4. I feel like I am dodging a bullet every day that I'm not vaccinated, despite our very safe protocols. I was caught off guard by the new vaccine schedule, and with metrics as they are now, I'm increasingly nervous. I want to be vaccinated and appreciate any support that the district can give to make this possible. Okay, that is, we just got one in from Jen Knox. Could we possibly reassess or resurvey which students need to return and try to accommodate them? There may be some parents on the fence with the survey who would change their plan provided. I don't know if Dr. Moshe or the board would find it useful to add additional surveys at any point. I would leave that up to Dr. Moshe for her part, or the board for the rest.
So the last survey we did, we actually have students placed in classes, individuals who indicated they would return. I'm not sure about another survey at this time.
Yeah, it would definitely, trying to change around the assignments that have been given would certainly make things more difficult, is my understanding from living with a teacher who is going through some of these same logistical questions. This is Charlotte Matthews. Most of our students, parents and grandparents have been absolutely wonderful. It's been a real treat to work in partnership with the parents. I agree, Charlotte. What we are doing, what we've done so far this year could not be done without the families and guardians at home. Absolutely a ton of credit to those who have been helping their students out. It's been fantastic. Jennifer Haney. See, I got it right that time. I can learn. Are there any high school teachers on the meeting that are willing to speak about their experience and how their kids have been doing? All I see on social media is how high school kids are being withdrawn every day because the frustration and lack of teaching is causing more challenges than imaginable.
So I think, I know John Patton is on. I don't think that is an accurate description of what's happening. We don't have kids withdrawing every day. And there is not a lack of teaching, and we have teachers. So, I certainly, if you want me to bring John in, I would be happy to. And in terms of the last comment, we're looking to wait 2 weeks, not a month, to discuss this again at the board level. We're looking to discuss it again on February 8th, I believe our next meeting is.
Well, and we are also discussing it right now tonight and have not made the decision. So that discussion is ongoing.
Correct.
May I just offer an anecdotal perspective on high school experiences, because I have a high schooler? There is frustration, and there is a tremendous amount of very skillful teaching. And so both are true. In my daughter's experience, every class is different, but she recognizes the work her teachers are doing to try to keep students engaged through the virtual platform. And so I imagine that that's an experience that some other high school students may also have had. And I wonder if Jordan, not to speak for others, but to speak for perhaps yourself, if you wished to speak about whether you feel that teachers in the high school are working through the virtual platform.
In my own personal experience, my teachers have been really helpful and supportive of me and I know they're always there if I have any questions. I can't speak for other students, but that's just been my perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up for discussion by the board on what to do based on Dr. Moshe's recommendations and the feedback we've gotten from the community and staff.
Well, I'll start, Brooke, by saying I appreciate everybody's comments. I appreciate us taking the time to actually go through them one by one. You and I, and Joe, were here just about a year ago when we had to look at the initial recommendation to close school. We didn't get any input from anybody when we made that decision. We made that decision based on the recommendations that we were getting from our government officials and the science. And as we proceeded throughout the year, we know that what information we were receiving in June was completely different than the information we received in April. And then again, by the time we got to September, it was again completely different from the information that we received in June. So that's why I brought the reference up of changing our course. And in September, we reviewed going back and looking at considerations in returning to school. And we made the recommendation to look at it in early November, and we did. And again, we held off and we didn't go back to school. Again, we looked at that again in December and in January as we continue to look at it. And I think where I'm at here is still on the same page I was back in September, which is if we are meeting the guidelines and we are following protocol, and we have students and teachers that would like to return back to in-person learning, and even as a hybrid, I'm all for that. I think that that's a step forward. And that's somebody made the remark about Governor Inslee today, and I did take a brief moment to just Google that. And it is true that he said that, not paraphrasing, but he's not asking anything more of teachers than he is of those grocery workers. And so I'm taking the recommendation from our government officials that I would be in favor of moving forward, provided that, again, we meet protocol and the guidelines provided by our local health officials.
So can I just interject? Because I appreciate what Damien's saying and what the governor has said. Just want to clarify one point. Couple points. Number one, our teachers will be working intimately over a 4-hour period, even though they're socially distanced and masked. And yes, grocery clerks work with people in a passing way. They don't have sustained contact, though they do have contact over an 8-hour period. It's a different kind of, I'm assuming an 8-hour period, a different kind of contact. And at our high school level, when students change classes, we're looking at teachers who would be in front of students for, again, 4.5 hours, but instead of 12 students like a cohort at the elementary level, it would be more like 60 students over the course of a day. So just, again, to be on the same page with it. I suspect I know he is saying that, as a grocery worker, you didn't expect to be on the front line, and you are. And so, now we're looking at teachers and saying, I know you didn't expect to be on the front line, and you are, but I think the comparison is a little bit short-sighted, just to be respectful.
And Marnie Jordan, any input?
I would just share that I really have a lot of compassion for the students in this moment. and for the parents. And I know that as a parent, it's incredibly stressful watching my children miss what they had with in-person schooling. But teachers are the service providers in this community that have the day-to-day interaction with students to the best of their ability through the virtual platform, sometimes in person. And if teachers aren't comfortable teaching, any kind of coercion to have them do their jobs in a way that they feel endangers their health and safety or their families, in my opinion, it challenges me to think about asking somebody to do their job in a context that they feel endangers them. And so I would just really celebrate a pathway forward that includes teacher choice around when they feel ready to be in the classroom according to the science and the accessibility of vaccines.
It's, yeah, all of this is very challenging in that we have to balance this moving target of science with the anecdotal information and the burgeoning scientific information around what this pandemic is doing to all of us emotionally and socially, especially to our kids whose brains are growing and whose bodies are growing. And so I absolutely appreciate Joe's recommendations and Joe's hard work working with the staffs and administrators in the buildings to put all those logistics in place so that we can move forward when we're ready. And I still truly and firmly believe from the beginning, and I'm looking at this from the lens of being a parent, the lens of being a community member, the lens of being a performing arts administrator who also is doing this absolute same balancing act consistently and constantly. And knowing, and also with the lens of teachers and knowing how hard they are working every day already and using the skill sets that they have to make sure kids are as well cared for as they possibly can be. I have to look at the science and I have to look at the do no harm clause that we should all be really focusing on as we think about our community that is over 50% elders, and think about our staff, which also has plenty of elders in it, or folks who are immune compromised or work with people who are immune compromised. And right now there are targets, even though we've met them from a school metric, they haven't been met on a, count. We're still in the phase 1 metric for a couple of those things. And so I would always rather look back at something and think, I did no harm, I overreacted, rather than experimenting with something that could be dangerous to someone and possibly endanger a life or create a situation where someone has a chronic illness because we went back too fast.
Jordan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't really have anything to add. I think personally, as a student, I just been seeing all these questions coming in from the community and parents and staff as well. And it's just been really interesting to see, and it's just a lot to take in, and it's going to be a hard decision. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is one that I continue to struggle with, because I think that there is, I want to acknowledge the fact that there is harm, the potential for harm on both sides. There is the potential for social emotional harm remaining away from school. There is the potential for physical harm going back to school. And that this is not an easy decision for me at all. It's not an easy thing to think about, because it is putting people's lives at risk and their mental state. I also want to note, it's weighing heavily in my thinking that this, even if we went back to first grade tomorrow, it wouldn't look like school. And I want to keep that front of mind, that being 6 feet apart from people, that your fellow students constantly, being masked, not being able to do a lot of the things that make school such a healthy environment is going to be very difficult, and look very different from the school that we all remember, even from last year. And I want to be cognizant and thoughtful of both the opinions of the parents who want their students back in school right now because they're seeing the mental health issues that are coming up, and also the teachers who are worried about risking their lives. I would love to see something, and I also want to acknowledge that we have not met the metrics. That as a county, we have not met the metrics for coming back to school yet. So choosing to come back to school immediately would be going against the recommendation of the Department of Health. I would love to see when those metrics improve, and as soon as they improve, once we meet those metrics, to be able to find some way to bring some of the additional students back in, as Dr. Moshe was saying, with those teachers who are eager and interested to return to school. I would love to see that as the first step. But that still requires us to meet the metrics, in my opinion. Yeah.
Brooke, I really appreciate and share that perspective. And I just want to acknowledge the complexity. If, for instance, there are grades with gaps around teachers who are comfortable or have the right health and family conditions for working in person.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, I'd like to talk about what recommendation or what guidance we want to give Dr. Moshe at this point. Immediate guidance, clearly we will keep looking at this every board meeting. It's going to be on our agenda until we are back to full face-to-face, because it is the largest issue at our school at the moment, in my opinion. So I'd like to get input on exactly what people would like to, what guidance people would like to give.
I would like to see us come back to the table with this in 2 weeks, when we have our workshop, and see if the metrics have moved at all, and see if Whidbey Health has more vaccines, because the facts keep moving on that as well, in terms of how many vaccines are available and who they're available to. You know, with the acknowledgement that, you know, we all want to be back in school, and we absolutely, you know, hear and support those families who, you know, need and want their kids to go back, and need that physical support of a school, brick and mortar building. I really feel like, since we haven't met the metric yet, you know, we have to act in a do no harm sort of space.
Marnie or Damien? You're muted, Damien. Damien, you're muted.
That's pretty much what I was saying, is that, you know, when we meet the guidelines and follow the protocols, and if that changes again tomorrow, then I feel that Joe has the ability, as our employee from my standpoint, and being hired and entrusted to do the job, that she knows what she's doing, and I trust in her judgment and everything else on a day-to-day basis, up until we do meet again. So, I mean, I'm in favor of supporting her presentation and guidelines, and letting her make those difficult decisions until we meet again. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I'd like to see us reopen, and I would have liked to have seen us reopen last April, but, you know, it is what it is.
Marnie?
Yeah, I would agree with what's been shared. I think that until we meet those metrics, a rapid change would be irresponsible. And for the next 2 weeks, I think following Dr. Moshe's recommendation and proceeding with caution is advisable. I would also just say that I hope we can return to this question and that it's being held very close to our hearts around how to support the emotional social needs of our students in this time. So I wonder if there's an opportunity to dive more deeply into that topic, just to make sure that we're doing all we can to support emotional social needs while we are not yet ready to be in person.
I think that would be a fantastic item to put on the agenda for the next board workshop.
Yep.
And to those community members listening in right now, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, Dr. Moshe, how would you like those passed along?
An email to me would be great.
Yeah. So if you have thoughts on how to support the social emotional health of our students, yeah.
I would love to hear specifically from mental health practitioners,
Mhm.
as well as our teacher corps at all grade levels to see, you know, maybe what they already have in place versus what they feel they're missing. I'd also love to hear from community services who are currently working to work with people, Readiness to Learn, the Homeless Coalition, anybody who works with basic needs and or activities that kids are doing, everything from service clubs to karate. I'd love to hear from the community about what is out there. So if nothing else, we can get some resources to people who are really struggling.
Okay.
That's a fantastic idea, Anne. Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing, let me just rephrase. We're basically going to do a variety of things. We're going to look at the specific teachers who may not be returning and whether or not, how that impacts. We're still moving toward returning our grade levels, but if we can return sort of pods of kids for extra support, or if they for social emotional support with people willing to return, we can move in that direction. Obviously you want to hear from us on what we're doing around social emotional needs and how we're supporting our students. What I'm also hearing though is we're not meeting the metrics. So we're not going to bring back first grade on the 8th of February. We're going to talk to the board again on the 10th. Is that true?
I would like to suggest, based on Damien's note, that we provide Dr. Moshe the support to make that decision on February 8th for first grade, based on the metrics at that time. What do people think about that
So
suggestion?
just to be clear, I need to make the decision on February 1st.
Right, sorry,
To
yes,
return February 8th.
right.
Today is January 25th. So we'll see what the metrics are in a week. I suspect that we won't meet them, but we'll know on Friday because we get the next output from the state on the metrics on Friday. So I will know Friday. On Monday, we make a decision to try and return on the 8th. And if we're not meeting the metrics, then we push it out another week. And we meet again on the 10th.
I'm seeing a lot of nods.
That would be my
nods from
recommendation.
Marnie and Anne. Sorry, Marnie, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, I would recommend that we invite Dr. Moshe to make that determination based on the metrics that are published prior to February 1st.
I absolutely concur.
Damien?
You already know where I'm at, Brooke. I mean,
I'm just looking for consensus here. Dr. Moshe, would you like us to pass, vote on a motion? Or are you comfortable with that direction as is?
I'm fine with what you've said. You know, I think I've reiterated it. You've clarified. We'll look at the metrics on Friday, make a determination. But But again, we're going to look at our staffing and our ability to do what we're trying to do. And if we don't have staff, we're going to look at how we can potentially fill in the gaps. What I'm not hearing you say is wait for a vaccine.
Well, I think that's another one of those difficult
Yep.
discussions, because I do want to acknowledge the wishes of the teachers. Yeah. Damien, you turned on your mic.
Yeah, I think the two things on that was choice. If they don't have a vaccine, they can choose not to go, and that part is there. I think though that somebody had made the remark that they're already involved in school and they're dodging a bullet every day. I think that would be a recommendation to follow up on, to find out how you can elevate someone's status for receiving the vaccine based on already being involved in in-person learning, B, being willing to go back to in-person learning. If we can create some elevated status there to getting vaccinated, I think
So-
it's.
Along those lines, superintendents lobbied along with a variety of other folks, including WEA, to elevate the status of teachers. And we were able to do that. The issue right now is there is no vaccine available, or I shouldn't say no, the supply is not meeting the demand. So, that is a concern. So, someone in the comments indicated, we're looking at 2 months. That's an accurate estimation. If we wait for the vaccine, we're probably 2 months out. We're looking at an April start. And I know that's frustrating. Nobody wants to hear that. So, okay.
There was also a comment about, and I believe Damien quoted the governor for us, about the governor comparing teaching to working in a grocery store. And I just want to note that when we're thinking about vaccines, as vaccines become more available to a broader segment of the public, working in a grocery store will become increasingly lower risk in terms of exposure to unvaccinated populations. Whereas to my knowledge, there is not yet a vaccine that's approved in the United States for use in people under 18. So working in the school will continue to expose staff members to unvaccinated populations until that changes. And so that'll just add another layer of thoughtfulness for us to need to hold as we move forward.
Mhm. Yes, and the population under the at the elementary age level, they're still unclear on it because typically they don't show symptoms. So they could be carriers not showing symptoms, but at least our adults would be vaccinated and not at risk. And we know the students are, even if they experience COVID, their symptoms are mild. So yes, this is, there are no easy answers, but I just want to be clear on what you're asking, what you're directing me to do. So I'm not hearing that we wait for a vaccine for all of our staff. Obviously it would be ideal, but we're looking for the numbers to drop into an acceptable range. And then we move forward.
I'm seeing nods. Then yes, I believe that is the decision of the board.
Okay.
So have we given you the guidance that you need, Dr. Moshe?
I believe you have,
Okay.
as long as I think we're all in the same understanding.
Okay, we have a few more comments. I want to move through them as quickly as possible since it is 9:15 and I would like to actually get some sleep tonight. But yes, we will go through other comments. Many of them are addressing previous things, and it may be something where we just take the comment and the information to think about as we go forward. Brittany Winchester, I feel like through the conversation that the choices have come back have been in majority a teacher and board decision, and not based on the request of the students and parents. Why do a parent survey if that won't end up being a factor in the decision? I can certainly say that the survey, I know that the survey led into the logistics of how many students will be coming back, and that leads into our staffing needs.
Yeah, the survey was not a vote as to whether or not to open. The survey was about if we were, do you want your child to return to face-to-face school if we go back? So it was really about trying to figure out exactly what you said, Brooke, our numbers, so that we could staff in person and know what we needed in person versus remote.
Again, from Brittany Winchester, going back tomorrow may not look like school, but it would be better than what is going on now. Gwendy Hastings, yes, school will look different when we come back, and it won't be what it was. I can personally speak to the fact that something is better than nothing. My son has been attending school 4 days a week for the last 2 weeks, and his emotional mental health has improved greatly. I'm glad that that's been helpful. I really, really am. Kathy Glaze, so at what point will we just decide that hybrid will be pointless to return to? When will you decide, let's just stay home until the fall? I would say that based on what we've done thus far and what Dr. Moshe has presented us at each step, we're going to be looking at the metrics. As soon as the metrics will allow, we'll start seeing how many more students we can bring back in reasonable and rational phases. Yeah, I don't know that there's a hard cut line there, but I certainly understand the worry. Gwendy Hastings, in the next 2 weeks, can we look at the option of finding replacements for the teachers who don't want to come back yet? Can we reach out and see if we can fill the spots? Can we figure out what teachers' grades do want to come back and see if we need to fill the gaps? Can we do some work so that when we come back in 2 weeks, we aren't just recapping the same discussion? Let's work on other options that protects our teachers and our students' mental health. It is my understanding that those logistics are being worked on right now. Correct, Dr. Moshe?
That's correct.
Okay.
I was going to say, that's what we just directed her to do.
Gwendy Hastings, isn't there some social Zooms being facilitated currently happening in the higher grades? I believe that that is true.
It is. I'll give you a full report when we next meet.
Yep. Brittany Winchester, what about those students who've been struggling and requested to come back, but only some students are chosen?
We went based on teacher recommendation. Parents had input as well. And, again, if folks are seeing students struggle, they need to contact their principal, and we can do our best to accommodate.
Kathy Glaze, as of last week, almost every ER in the region was boarding juvenile mental health patients, trying to admit them to an inpatient mental health facility. Imagine being 13, living in an ER for days, only to be denied placement daily. Living in a cold square room in a chaotic environment, waiting for a place to accept them. That is your mental health update. Gwendy Hastings, we need the social Zooms for the younger grades as well. We will get an update on exactly what's happening at each level next meeting.
And our next meeting is February 10th.
Yes. One last one, and then we're going to close off. If you have continued comments, please send them via email, and we will get responses to you and get you information based on your requests. But in the interest of actually finishing up our business here, this next one that I read will be the last one. Kimberly Taxoni, metrics are so widespread by regions. When do you consider local numbers? Vaccination will take months if you wait for that. It may not even be until fall if we're lucky. And even then it is not 100% immunity. This may be an unpopular opinion, but hire teachers who will work. I've been working with preschoolers since September, no outbreak. I would just like to note that there are complications with hiring additional teachers to replace those on leave. The union district relationships are complicated. Anything, anyone else, Dr. Moshe or any of the board members would like to say? Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully the metrics will be better on February 1st and we can move forward. I adjourn this meeting. Thank you and good night.